Welcome. My name is Jose Melendez, Campaign Director for the Taxpayer Protection Project at TPPF, and today we're talking about taxpayer empowerment. Our focus will be on the matter of homelessness. So let's get started. I'm delighted to introduce my guest, someone who has been on the front lines in the homelessness space, founder of the Other Ones Foundation, Chris Baker. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Jose, for having me.
Fantastic. So you've been involved in the homelessness services space and advocacy for several years now. I want to do two things. I want you to introduce yourself to our audience, tell us who Chris Baker is, and then talk to us about the Other Ones Foundation. What led to the creation of that organization?
Sure. So I am a person, I've been involved in homelessness for about a decade. Mm-hmm. I'm a person who had a bit of a turbulent life, getting through high school as a high school dropout. I was very enamored with the subculture of the streets. As a youth, I did a lot of traveling around, hitchhiking, riding on freight trains, and doing a lot of drugs. And I'm very fortunate in that I had a family that really cared about me. And because of that, I never really found myself experiencing chronic homelessness.
Sure.
But I did everything in my power to get there. Trust me when I say. I got myself into a program that got me a high school diploma in a real short period of time. I went to a community college following that. Went from a community college to a 4-year school, mm-hmm. and then I graduated in 2008. And if you'll remember, 2008 was not exactly the best time to be entering the job market. Mm-hmm. And so I found a job up in Albany, New York, working overnights at a homeless shelter. And having had the life experience that I had had up to that point, I felt like I had really found my people. I had found my calling. And I have been involved in homeless services ever since then. One sort of problem that I kept seeing kind of no matter where I was working in homeless services was that I didn't always feel like the voices of the people that we were serving were front and center in how we designed and delivered the services to help them. Mm-hmm. And so in 2016, I went on this journey of discovery, of going out and talking to people who were living in encampments and under bridges and in our parks. And I started asking them the question, what is the big gap that exists in our system? Where is there help that you need that's not available? And Jose, 100% of the time, mm-hmm. the answer that people gave was that they wanted access to work opportunities. And that led to the creation of TUF's first program, which was called Workforce First. Mm-hmm. And the idea there being that we remove every barrier that's in the way of getting somebody onto a job site. And, we go around, we pick people up in a van, tell them, let's put the cardboard sign down for the day, and let's get you into a park where we can pick up trash, get people paid. And that program had a tremendous amount of success right out of the chute and grew very quickly. And that led to another program and another program and another program until the Other Ones Foundation got to where it's at today. I actually ran the Other Ones Foundation up until April of this year, when I stepped away as the executive director, and I've been kind of focusing on local policy stuff since then.
Sure. Well, it sounds like you found your calling here in this homelessness space. So on that note, it's a very simple question, but it's one that carries a lot of weight. Can you describe to us what the current state of play is in the homelessness space here in Texas?
Yeah. I think like most other places across the country, we're seeing increases in homelessness. The data is kind of hard to parse through because some of the data collection methodology is not perfect. But, let's say there's somewhere between 30 and 40,000 people that are experiencing homelessness on any given night here in Austin. We've seen some of the biggest increases demographically have been in families experiencing homelessness for the first time. That's families with children. and then older adults experiencing homelessness. And older adults tend to be more chronically homeless. So that's less first-time homelessness. But as concerns first-time homelessness, we're seeing more and more families, households with children experiencing homelessness. Now, there are some outliers around the state. Southeast Texas is one. I mean, we've seen huge spikes there, 60% increases in homelessness. And then Dallas is also an outlier where we've actually seen some progress. We've seen some reduction in homelessness. We've got homelessness across the board in Dallas is down about 20%. Unsheltered homelessness down 35%. And, I think that there's a lot of reasons. This is a pretty complex issue. I won't get into all of the reasons just yet, but the way that we've designed our system to respond to homelessness is evolving. And in Texas, I think that evolution is happening in a rather robust way. So that's good.
I think part of it too is I think the public's perception of homelessness is what they see front and center, right? A lot of times when I'm walking up and down Congress Avenue, it's the homeless that are there going up and down the streets, but a lot of times it's the ones you don't see, right? It's the single mom with kids who's couch surfing from one house to the next. And that's something that needs to be part of the conversation as well. Would you say that?
Absolutely, yeah. I think that there's the highly visible, sort of highly in your face, like high cotton homeless, people who are very mentally ill, who are living with substance use disorders, become the face of homelessness. And I think that's kind of unfortunate and kind of unfair. I think that actually represents a relatively small number of the total people who are experiencing homelessness on any given night in Texas and across the country. So yeah, I'd agree with that.
So several years ago, the federal government came out with Housing First as a solution to our homelessness situation. And, talk to us a little bit about what Housing First is and maybe how your view has changed on this issue or on this solution.
Sure, yeah. So this is a big one. And there's a lot of nuance in this. And I will say first that, I think that we can all agree that really our goal is to help people find stability and to live fulfilling lives, and that looks different from person to person.
Sure.
Now, the idea behind Housing First, and I think it's sound, is that the first step is to get somebody into housing. And then following that, we wrap around them. We offer all the supportive services that are going to lead to that stability that we're after, right? So things like job training, education, substance use treatment, healthcare. And in a perfect world, that makes a lot of sense. And come with me for a minute. And we'll go to a fantasy land, right? To a place where there's a ton of affordable housing stock, where where we've got the sort of unlimited ability to offer people a variety of different treatment services, and where homelessness, and I think this is a key part, where there's not a ton of people living on the streets, right? Where the case load that needs to be managed is relatively low, the housing stock is relatively high, the affordable housing stock is relatively high, and we are able to really execute on getting somebody into the housing unit first, and then following that up with all of the resources that are going to lead to stability. But we don't live in that perfect world, right? We live in a world where homelessness is high, affordable housing stock is low, and the services are difficult to come by, right? So what that has led to is a sort of a bastardization of the concept of Housing First. And what we're left with is an approach of housing only, right? And what is designed to be housing first actually winds up becoming housing last. And what I mean by that is that many programs and services, the end goal is the housing unit. And then once somebody's in that housing unit, we step away. And that's kind of backwards, right? And so if all of our programs and services are aimed only at getting somebody into housing, then it's going to be really difficult for them to find that stability once they're in that housing unit. And let's also just be like real upfront about something that I think is an important piece of the conversation, is that there is some percentage of people, and I don't think it's the majority, I don't think it's most people, but the folks we were talking about before, there are going to be people for whom the only path to stability is to house them without conditions, right? Like, there are always going to be people who are living with conditions that lead to such profound disability that the only way that it is our responsibility as caring human beings to make sure that that person has safe and stable housing. But I don't think that that's true for most people. Now, the idea of one of the underlying concepts on housing first is we want to remove as many barriers as possible to housing, which is good. One of the places where we've kind of stumbled on that is that rather than removing all barriers to housing, we've removed all conditions to housing, right? And I come from a faith tradition that teaches me to love people unconditionally. And
Sure.
Loving people unconditionally is good. Housing people unconditionally is always going to wind up bringing about a bunch of challenges, right? So I think that there is a wide spectrum of people who find themselves experiencing homelessness, who need a wide spectrum of interventions in order to find that stability. And if we treat the issue of homelessness as only a housing issue, then it's going to be very difficult to address the underlying issues. Homelessness is a thing that exists at the intersection of like every societal ill that you can imagine, right? Mental illness, substance use disorder, education, you name a societal ill and it contributes to the issue of homelessness. So anyway, that is to say, I think these are all conditions that need to be treated both on a systemic level and on an individual level in order to resolve sort of capital H homelessness, like the person, but then also homelessness as like a policy issue.
Before we move on to the next question, do you see any other unintended consequences or shortcomings to housing first?
I think, I think what I kind of said before is kind of the unintended consequence, right? Is that like we put all of our resources into the programs and services that lead up to the housing intervention, and we also want to. Our systems also want to see a lot of numbers, right? They want to see a lot of people being housed, which leads us to house people in whatever way is most convenient, right? So I don't know how, like, you want me to get like kind of wonky, like a little bit deep into the stuff?
I think we may need to.
Okay.
Let's do
it.
All
right. So when we have what we call a homeless response system, right? Mm-hmm. Is the whole system of programs and services that are that are trying to help people find that stability that we were talking about before. And so when someone enters into that system, they're going to fill out an assessment, And then based on that assessment, they're going to get a score, right? And the people who score lowest on that assessment are probably not going to receive any services at all. And the expectation is that those people will self-resolve their homelessness. Then we take a step up from that, and you have a bunch of people who what we call light touch. So these are the folks who we light touch, programs that we call prevention and diversion, right? Like maybe those are folks who need a bus ticket home to their family, or they just need help paying the deposit on a rental unit. Then we take a step up from there, and those are people who we utilize an intervention called rapid rehousing. Now, the idea behind rapid rehousing is you get somebody into the housing unit, you pay their rent for some period of time. Usually that is up to 2 years. And during that 2-year period, the expectation is that they will become self-sufficient, and then eventually that housing subsidy goes away, and the person is on their own. And then the very highest level is we treat people with an intervention called permanent supportive housing. And what we were, again, like going back to what we were talking about before, these are the people who are the highest acuity, highest need, and are going to always need to have our support if they're going to stay stably housed. Now, one of the problems that we have in our system is that we have an abundance of rapid rehousing resources and very little permanent supportive housing resources. We must be preserving those precious few permanent supportive housing resources for the people who need them the most. Instead, we're kind of taking people off the top of the list that's created by this assessment, and we're utilizing maybe a rapid rehousing intervention for somebody who maybe needs a permanent supportive housing intervention, and then maybe using a permanent supportive housing intervention for maybe somebody who only needs a rapid rehousing intervention. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And so it creates a lot of log jams, if that makes sense. So I think that we are moving towards a system that has more of a balanced approach, which is a good thing. We have a lot of people who are living on our streets, and we can kind of keep pulling people out one at a time, and that is like, we have to keep doing that. The only way that we're really going to be able to sort of like really get these numbers down is if we stop people from flowing in the first place, right? Because what happens is that people flow in, and maybe they go from being somebody who just needs a simple, rapid, light touch intervention. They become homeless, then they lose the ID, then they lose, and then the addiction comes, and all of this stuff happens, and it leads to now we have somebody who's chronically homeless who needs that highest level of intervention.
All because someone might have missed $20 or didn't have $20 to pay rent.
Exactly, 100%. And so where we are finally like putting a lot more focus on these lower level interventions, right? Which I think is really good. Another thing that I think we leave out of the conversation is that there is an economic angle of this whole thing also. When we think about homeless services, we very rarely think about job training as part of that. And I think that is a major mistake. Look, I've been doing this work for a long time, and the people who are living on our streets are living with a lot of issues. Lazy is not one of them. It just isn't, right? I mean, think about the amount of work it takes to live in a tent in the woods. And if we can find ways to take that energy and refocus it into into product, something that's more productive and will lead to that stability that we're looking for, I think we will have some more success. And we're seeing that at the Other Ones Foundation. So.
Well, let's touch on that a little bit. So you run the Esperanza community. What makes Esperanza different from, say, other places that provide homeless services?
Yeah, that's so. The Esperanza community is unique in a couple of ways. Mm-hmm. The first is that we do everything that we can to prevent somebody from coming in. It's a shelter, essentially, right? And we do everything that we can on the front end to prevent somebody from coming into the shelter at all. So we'll ask people a series of questions when they come in, and we'll say, is there anywhere in the world that you can go today where your housing crisis is going to be resolved? And you'd be surprised how often people say, well, yeah, I've got a cousin in Mississippi, or I've got my parents live in Alaska, and I can totally go live with them. I just can't get there. And I'm like, well, let's get you on an airplane, And then sometimes, in that same situation, the cousin in Mississippi or the parents in Alaska may say, Bob is totally welcome to come and live with us as long as he doesn't, name the behavior, right? And so one of the things that TOOF will do is they'll get in touch with that family member, and they'll kind of set up a contract between the family and that person. And they'll say, all right, Bob, you can go, and your parents have said that you can go and live with them as long as you stay away from liquor or whatever it is. And then we'll offer that family then months worth of like remote counseling in order to make sure that they're successful. The other thing that that TOOF has done that is we're starting to see some really beautiful early successes is in the marriage of shelter and job training, right? So we have built on the campus of the Esperanza community a trade school, and we partner with the local community college who comes in and offers classes in HVAC and automotive and welding and electrical, high demand career paths. And if we can help somebody get beyond, and this is like kind of the concept of housing first, right? Is like, if someone's not like daily fighting for their survival, then it's going to make it easier to do things like get vocational training. So at Esperanza, we do that same sort of thing, right? But we do it in shelter. So you're here, you're safe. We can kind of turn down the crisis. You don't have to worry about food. You don't have to worry about staying dry tonight. We're going to wrap around you and we're going to support you, but we're also going to add this element of job training. And then people can come out on the other side of that, moving more towards self-sufficiency. And I think like ultimately it saves us all a lot of heartache in the long run, right? Because if now we can avoid having to put that person on some sort of permanent or long-term housing subsidy, it's good for everybody. It's good for them. It's good for the people,
the community as a whole.
It's good for the community as a whole.
You mentioned a couple of trade jobs. I believe electrical, HVAC. You think about workforce development. Those are some of the trades that are high demand, high paying,
right?
But shortage of interest.
Absolutely. And
it's good to hear that your community, Esperanza community, is actually teaching folks or putting them through job training for these trades.
Yeah, and it's very much like the interventions that we utilize to get people off the streets, right? Mm-hmm. Personalized, responsive, we're not going to, and this is like, and I don't mean to beat on the issue, but like this is kind of one of the problems with housing first, is that it's like we're going to do this one thing and it's what we're going to do for everybody, and that's just like not going to work with an issue that's as complex as homelessness. And it's the same thing with economic development, right? Like, it's not going to work if we say, all right, everybody is going to go and be trained in auto mechanics, right? Because the job market moves, and so the part of that program is following the trends, and putting people on career paths where the most need is in the industry, and then of course matching them with a thing that they like, that they want to do, that they think they can have some success in.
So a fun question for you before we move on to the final question. So if you could snap your fingers and make any policy change that you could to, effectively, in a positive manner, affect the Other Ones Foundation, what would that be?
In replicating some of the successes that we've seen in Dallas, one of the things that we did was we created a homeless strategy office within the city of Austin. Mm-hmm. And that homeless strategy office is looking at that like full spectrum that we talked about, everything from prevention and diversion to emergency shelter to rapid rehousing to permanent supportive housing, and supporting all of those things. And what has come out of that is a plan that the city put together. And I think that if we could actualize that plan, we would start to see some real meaningful reductions in homelessness. That would be good for the Other Ones Foundation because there's funding in that plan for job training. There's funding in that plan for emergency shelter. I also think that and this is less of a policy thing and more of just sort of a philosophical thing. I think that like one of the things that our system needs to do, and I don't know how you do this with policy, but we need to start thinking of people as the assets that they are rather than like a burden that needs to be dealt with. And I think that our systems have treated people as burdens that need to be dealt with for far too long. People are capable. Look, I'm a person who's a shining example of how you get to become homeless, right? Like I told you earlier, I did everything when I was a kid right if what I wanted to do was end up homeless on the streets. But you found your calling and you redirected that energy to a very positive cause. That's right. And I think that everybody has that ability. Let me rephrase that and say, I think the vast majority of people have that ability, and we need to really believe in people. If we continue to, treat people as though they're a burden, and we put them on a list to get housing, and then they sit on that list, and they're just sitting on that list waiting for housing, because we've told them that that's the thing that they need to do, then it's not going to create the sort of paradigm shift that I think we need in order to empower people. I'm going to share a quick story about something that we found early on when we were running the Workforce First program. So when we very first started running that program, we would get people into the program and we would give them a cell phone and we would give them a bus pass. Here you go. These are yours. You can have them. Now that you've got them, we can get in touch with you you can get in touch with us and we can get in touch with you. The cell phone, you have access to transportation to the bus pass. And that's a very well-meaning move, right? And I think it makes sense. But what wound up happening was that this phone and this bus pass would inevitably disappear within the first couple of days, right? And people would come back and they'd need another phone or they'd need another bus pass. And so what we started doing was we started saying on your first day of work, rather than giving you a phone and a bus pass, we're going to sell you a phone and a bus pass. And of course, at first, it irritated everybody. They're like, "You're trying to make money off us." And of course, we're not selling it anywhere near what we're paying for it. The idea wasn't to punish people or make them give us money. It was the thought was, if we can get people invested in these things, maybe they'll stop disappearing. And wouldn't you know it, as soon as we started doing that, people started holding on to those phones. They started holding on to those bus passes, right? It's like creating an environment where people have some skin in the game, I think is super important.
Excellent. So final question, because I want to end on a positive note. Share some success stories, whether it's through the Other Ones Foundation or maybe through some of your personal advocacy.
My favorite story. So at the Esperanza community, one of the things that we do there is we create transitional jobs. And these jobs generally within the community. Sometimes the jobs will go outside, but mostly they're inside the community, doing food service or picking up trash. And early on, there was a guy who was disabled, and we were having a hard time connecting him with a job that he was able to do, and that we had a hard time connecting this guy with a job that he was able to do. And he came and talked to me one day, and he said, I've tried this and I've tried that, but my knees and my back, but I've been thinking about it, and I used to be a mural artist. I used to paint these big, beautiful murals all over, West Texas, but I haven't done it in so long. But I think it's something I'd like to try again. And so I was like, all right, well, why don't we, find some places around the community where we can use some art, and let's take a crack at that. And I'm thinking maybe we take a shot at this, and maybe he does really well and we lean into it, or maybe he doesn't and we got to figure something else out. But in the community there, we have we have a community center, and we started in there. And I said, why don't you take all the values of the organization and go and paint them above every door in the building? And so he did. He went and started doing it. And it started off, it was like, okay, I don't know if this is going to work. But he got his groove back really fast. And a couple of values into it, and these things started really looking really beautiful. And then I said, well, why don't we have you paint a mural behind the front desk? And he painted this mural behind the front desk that was just absolutely beautiful. And he really got back into the art. He moved out to Community First Village, where he got involved in the art house there, in teaching people how to do art and creating artwork and selling it. And before you know it, he's living on his own. He recently was able to sell a commissioned Stevie Ray Vaughan painting for $30,000. And that we wound up having him come back. He's like painted murals all over the community, even after he wasn't living there anymore. And that's just a perfect example of like helping people find the thing that they're good at, and helping them get to a place where that thing that they're good at is going to be the thing that leads to their stability, right? Now, not everybody's going to be an artist. That's an outlier for sure. But it's really, it's about looking at each individual person, finding their strengths and leaning into those things.
So we recently did a write-up on Esperanza, and I have this mural here in our article. Is that one that he did?
That is absolutely one that he did.
The camera can zoom in, but that's pretty neat. That's a great story, Chris. Thank you so much for joining the program.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.